business owners in downtown Ephrata, this should inspire you that when we see one of our anchor buildings that in downtown that's going to be redeveloped into something, it's not just that building that is benefiting or having an impact. That is going to create a positive impact for you too, for your business. So, Kim is I say she's the vice president of the York County Economic Alliance, but officially she's the assistant vice president of economic and community development of the York County Economic Alliance.
It's a mouthful.
So they are a nonprofit organization, just like Mainspring. So they are not a branch of the government. They're not a branch of the municipality. They are a 501c3/501c6. So they have to raise money the same way we do. So, okay, without further ado, can everybody see that? Okay, I don't need to turn any lights off, do you think? Okay. And can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here. We did this exact presentation. I haven't changed it at all since at the PDC conference, but this is probably my favorite story to tell. And it was a very exciting time. It was also a horrible time, and everything was awful during the project, and we'll tell all those stories, but it all comes together in the end, and it's a really fun story to tell now that we're on the other side of it. But Kim Hogeman, York County Economic Alliance, just like you said, and just like the Lancaster EDC, we're the county's economic development agency, but we also staff our Main Street organization. We are also the Chamber of Commerce, and then we have some county government entities like the Redevelopment Authority and the Industrial Development Authority that we staff. So we have staffing agreements with them. And that all comes into play when we start talking about how we pull our funding together. So it's really interesting how we kind of pull those puzzle pieces together. So it's a very interesting project, but it's a good case study for any other project. So it doesn't have to be a hotel. Like you said, it could be a business center or a theater or a church or whatever. Something that's in your downtown that serves as an anchor that can be whatever it is you need it to be. Ours was a hotel, and we wanted it to stay a hotel. So this is a great case study. This hotel was built in 1925, and it operated as a hotel in our downtown the entire time until it shut down in 2016. And at that time, it was just going dark. The owners walked away, and then we were going to have this massive building in the middle of our city that was just a shell that could either be redeveloped or become something uncomplimentary or eventually be demolished after it sat there and created blight for a long time. So it was a really great experience, and we could not have done it without our amazing team that we pulled together with all of our boards and our volunteers, all of our partners. So just look at it as a lens towards your project. It doesn't always have to be a hotel. So we had an amazing team. So the York County Economic Alliance, which is my employer, and then we staff the Industrial Development Authority, so it's a county government entity, and they can act as a conduit for funding sources that are not always available to, like the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program, RACP dollars, and other state grants. They can be a conduit for those kinds of funds. And then we had our architects and engineers, we had our attorneys, which, again, we had a lot of problems and we had a lot of legal challenges, so they were an amazing part of this team. We had a historic consultant, our interior designer, let's see, who else do we have up there? And our construction manager, which was just an incredible team that everybody pulled together to become this resource to get this project over the finish line. And our ultimate objective from the very beginning was to make sure that we had the premier hotel in downtown. There's no other hotel in the downtown. This is the only one. So if you're coming into the city, you have to stay on the perimeter. You have to stay on Route 30. You have to stay several miles away and then get in there. Whether you're driving, if you're traveling or Ubering, whatever. We didn't have anything downtown. So we really wanted to have this hotel rejuvenated. The other challenge, and we'll get into that, is that before it shut down, it was in pretty bad shape. So it wasn't thriving. It was failing a very long, slow death. And then it finally shut down. So going through this renovation was really important. We were either going to save it or we weren't. It didn't have ADA accessibility, it didn't have sprinklers, federal employees weren't allowed to stay there, it hadn't been updated since the 80s or 90s. It was really failing. So it was a pretty heavy lift to get this thing done. But the reason why we got involved, we felt it was very, very important for the community in general, and someone had to do it. So when the hotel started to shut down, it was maybe around 2014. It was owned by Starwood. You know, they're a huge property owner. They bought it at a tax sale with a package of other hotels. They didn't really want it. They bought it, I don't know, maybe around 2000, and didn't give it any budget. It just started declining, and they really weren't paying attention to it. And they were just going to slowly shut it down. So around 2014, they started talking about just walking away. And we, YCDA and the IDA, decided we don't want this to happen, so we need to find somebody to do this project. So we spent a year trying to talk other people into doing this project, and everybody said, you know, not it, absolutely not. No, we're not touching it. So it became a little bit closer. It was around mid-2015, and they said, December, we're out. So we started applying for grants, we started calling the governor, we started calling our legislators, and we were able to get the initial funding, a $10 million RACP grant. And I said, well, we all said, the board said, I guess we're gonna do this. So it became us. And then we thought, okay, maybe it doesn't have to be a hotel, maybe it could be something else. And so we started trying to find something else to be in this space that could be an anchor. The only interested party is a very important entity, and it is a very strong need, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in the main street of downtown in the Market District. But there was an undesirable intent, and it was a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a national security, Homeland Security, federal prison early release program. And it is important. It is very important, but it doesn't have to be downtown. And they had this huge group of early release federal inmates that had a 30% violent rate, and they wanted to put it in the middle of our Market District. And so we were like, okay, we'll find you somewhere else to go, but it can't be here. And then we decided, all right, we're going to figure out how to be hoteliers. We're going to figure this out. So that's how we got involved. A story I like to compare it to is the Hotel Sterling, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Hotel Sterling, but it's a very similar path. A hotel that was built, opened in 1898, ours opened in 1925, but it was, a very similar sized building, and they also had a lot of, different hands over the years, and it became apartments, and then they walked away, and then the community came together and said, we want this to be a hotel again. And so they tried to pull a project together in 2002, couldn't get the money together, administrations change, people change, a different group comes together in 2007. They pulled some money together, they started the project, they got partway through it, and the rest of the community just didn't really come together. They didn't have the support, from their board, from the local businesses, from grants, from other funding sources, and the project failed. And then it sat there until 2013, and they finally tore it down. So it can happen. It can happen to really great projects. So I feel really, really lucky that we didn't have that problem. Our project was on the chopping block more than once, halfway through, because we ended up in the middle of COVID and other problems. And you get into the middle of a project, you think it's going to be 40 million, you go out to bid, and it's all of a sudden it's COVID and you're $15 million over budget, and all the board members heavily consider, maybe we shouldn't do this. But we did it. It's good. And it's done. So throughout the entire project, it's really important. This is something that, it wasn't always my favorite thing to do, but it ended up being fun, is all the storytelling, doing presentations, giving people tours. We did probably 400 tours throughout the entire project. We did about 3 a week. You just have to set some parameters. I said, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., and then people would sign up. And so local businesses, friends groups, everybody, banks, restaurants, merchant groups, the business associations, anyone. We would give tours to everybody, but it kept everybody really excited. It kept everybody really, really engaged in the project, and they felt like they knew the story as well. So they could go out and tell the community members, this is what's really happening, this is why it's important. And at the same time, we could get feedback from them. How do you want to use this space? Are we building it the right way? Are we building it in a way that the community is going to feel like they can use this space? Do they want to use the space, and how? What kind of meeting space do we need? We're not going to do a pool. I don't care what anybody says. We're not putting a pool in there. But for the most part, we got really great feedback, and then everybody felt like they were ambassadors of the project. So that was really important. It also really helped with the fundraising and fundraising. And when I get into the capital stack, it really comes to mind when we would do tours with our college, our healthcare center. They ended up naming spaces and donating $1 million to the project in order to name a space. And they weren't paying $1 million to name a space. They were paying $1 million to make sure this project got over the finish line to have that economic development impact. So having those friends come on board was really important. But we did 400 tours, Facebook Lives. These are not my favorite things to do, but we do them and it's fun. You know, we put on a hard hat, we climb up on a ladder, and we pretend to hang wallpaper. We do a Facebook Live. It helped with the community partners. So the project progression, it took a lot longer than we thought. I do remember a sign on the front of the building that said coming soon in 2018 when we first started this project, because we were so naive. We thought, okay, we can add some sprinklers, we can get some new furniture, we'll be done in 2 years. Absolutely not. Once we really got into the project, we found way more asbestos and lead and every kind of a project problem imaginable. There was no ADA accessibility. We had no idea how we were going to get through this. And we had several rounds of value engineering as well, because we think we've got our mind around it. We've got a great team. We go out to bid. Literally, we're $15 million over budget overnight, and then we have to figure that out. So there's always a reason. We do a little value engineering. We cut some things off the project, but we also have to figure out, like, why does everybody else think it's this much, and what are we missing? So we have to go back to the drawing board and we figure it out, and we raise more money, and we reduce the scope. So we had a couple scope changes throughout the way, but I feel like we really did it right in the end. So closed November of 16, then we had to clear out the building. It was full. Like, they never threw anything away, ever. There were, when the building closed, when the hotel closed, I want to say there was around 175 rooms, and only 95 of them were in service. But all of those mothball rooms were full of broken furniture, leaky pipes, mold. They would have a pipe break, they would turn off that water, they would shut that door, move to the next room. And they did that for a decade or two. So we had 100 rooms that we had to clean out, and that were full of broken furniture, plus good furniture. So anyway, we had to clean out the building, and then we had to get into all that. We ended up approaching it in phases. So we had to demo a section in the back. We did core and shell, which was like masonry, windows, elevator. And then the interior reconstruction, and then grand opening. But it was, a very tight urban center, so we had to do some demolition downtown. That's challenging. We also, at different points in the project, decided, well, it is historic. It is from the 20s. It is within our historic district. It is on the National Register. Maybe we can get some historic tax credits, and that can be part of our capital stack. So that means restoring the hotel to National Park Service, Secretary of Interior Historic Standards, which at the time we're like, great, that's awesome. It's really hard. It was worth it. We got a lot of money from it, and it was a big part of the capital stack, but that was a real challenge, and in hindsight, I might not do that again. We'll see. Who knows? It's not always up to me. And then we also decided we would like this to be a flag. It should not necessarily be a boutique hotel. Maybe we need a Hilton or a Marriott. Like, what could it be? It's a really unique building. It's a really special building, and it's very beautiful. So we decided to, go big or go home. We were going to go after Marriott or Hilton. And we went to Marriott first. Hated it. It was a horrible experience. We were so, like, tail between our legs going home. Okay, what did we do wrong? But that really, I think set us up for success with Hilton. We learned a lot from the Marriott meeting. And we approached Hilton and approached it as a Tapestry, which is that's their unique brand. It's their boutique brand. And they loved it. They loved it right away. So it ended up working out okay, and we learned a lot. So yes, that was a good experience. And Hilton comes with its own reservation system, honors program, international travelers, international business. We wanted this to have that extra oomph. We want people to come from everywhere. And then at figuring out how to add in ADA accessibility, there was no elevator to all of the public spaces for some reason. There was no elevator to the lobby. the ballroom, the mezzanine, the roof, any of the public spaces. And we were adding in the roof as a public space. That was not a public space before. And then finding the money to do it. Those pictures from 1926, and if you visit it, those stairs are still there, all the wood trim is still there, the light fixtures, it's absolutely beautiful. So we emptied the building, we had a public auction, we consolidated all of the things, we made piles, we had 300 irons and 300 beds, desks, and you name it, everything that's in a hotel. We had a huge auction, and we also saved a lot of stuff. We got a storage unit, we put anything in there that was even remotely beautiful and potentially historic. We didn't really know. So we donated a third of the building, we sold a third, and we kept a third. And then we also had a lot of community events, kind of like this. We invited everyone to come, we talked about the project, what do you want to see, how do you want to use it, if it's going to be historic, if it's going to be Hilton, trying to get everybody involved and keep them involved. So we did a lot of presentations. It was really great. It was a really great experience, and it did generate a lot of interest, and it kept everybody excited. So the demolition phase, in 1957, this section was added in the back, that aluminum section, and so to the right of that, that's the original hotel that was built in 1925, and then that was added in 1957. All of those hotel rooms at the time of closure were mothballed. None of them were in use. So they didn't do a great job. It wasn't a really great space. Everything was very antiquated and dated, and they didn't use it at all. And it was over top of a parking garage that was structurally unsound and had been shut down since 2013. So nobody used it. So we had to take that whole section off. And then, so that was the demolition of that back section, and then we had to build a wall where they had added the addition. So that was in a very tight, there's an alley, a street, and an alley. So it was actually really interesting how they did it. They removed as much as they could, and then they had a robot, like Nintendo. You drive this thing out, everybody's standing on the roof of the main building, and this giant robot goes out and has these claws. And it would pick it apart and then dump it down to the next floor. And then they would do that, and they'd go to the next floor, and they'd pick it all apart and dump it down to the next floor. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun to go through this part. So this is the hotel after that section was removed. And then COVID hit. So we take this off and we're ready to build the wall, and then all of a sudden we've got COVID. And now we've got no windows and no south wall. And we were supposed to have this, get going in a couple of months. Well, a year or two later, we're finally building a wall. And that's really hard. We all live in the same town, and I go to the store, I go to have lunch, and somebody's like, why is there no wall? How come there's no wall? What are you doing with this hotel? What's happening? And you have to explain. It's really hard. So the hotel looked like that for a significant amount of time. And then once we got through that, we got into the interior reconstruction and we start rebuilding. But we had to completely gut it. We took it all the way down to the concrete column system. We took everything off the walls all the way to the exterior masonry. There was a lot of mold. There was a lot of masonry leaks. We had to repoint the entire building. Initially when we started, we thought we were going to be able to repoint just a third of it, and then it leaked. And so we repointed more, and then it leaked again, and again. And then finally we just said, all right, we're going to just repoint the entire thing. And no more leaks, no mold, everything's great. But going through this with the Secretary of Interior Historic Standards was pretty challenging. Anything that's considered a public space has to be restored to their standards, which meant all of the corridors on all the guest floors, so chair rails, crown moldings, the exact location of the corridors are considered public space. So that was a real challenge because we needed to widen the corridors, we needed to widen the doorways, we needed to drop the ceilings to add sprinkler systems, but there was historic transom. So we had to come up with a lot of creative solutions. We had to come very specific problem solving on a lot of areas because the initial reaction of the National Park Service is absolutely not, you can't touch it. But then current code says, well, you have to. You can't just leave it that way. So you have to find a solution. And that really added a lot of time. There was a lot of challenges, a lot of things to overcome. So the Hilton Tapestry, that was the brand that we wanted. That's the one we went after. They are a very unique brand of Hilton, but their tagline is weave your own story. So most of their tapestry collection are adaptive reuse projects in communities that are old churches, synagogues, post offices, things like that. This one did happen to be a hotel, but to weave your own story. It's very, very unique. So then we have opportunities to include public art and other things that we can really bring the community together and make it feel like, this is still owned by the community. It's the community's hotel. So yeah, it is a Hilton and it is a Tapestry, but it is still our hotel. And we have all sorts of ways that we incorporated the community into this, by naming all the public spaces, by having local artists do all of the art in the hotel, and then having all of the, even like the framed prints that are in the guest rooms, they're local photos. They're photos of the hotel, they're historic photos of previous employees over the years. So there's a lot of ways to make it really feel like it is still our hotel. And it is. People misunderstand. They think, oh, well, Hilton owns it. No, they don't own it, and they didn't pay for it. So our capital stack. This was really creative, and I have some notes that actually list the actual sources. But we had 2 different state grants. We had the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program and ISRP. ISRP is Industrial Sites Reuse Program. So those can run through, like the Lancaster EDC. You can use that as a conduit. There's a lot of different entities that can be the recipient, and then you have a sub-grantee agreement. So there's a lot of ways to get these types of fundings for community development projects, projects that create jobs, projects that have a high economic impact. We also had ARPA funds, federal and state tax credits. We had our own equity in it, several million of our own equity in it. Corporate naming rights, family naming rights, and then we went after every small grant we could. We went for grants through AT&T, First Energy, our electric company, WellSpan Health, Rotary. We went to all the community foundations that we could find, and we used that funding for almost all the other state funds and federal funds. They are restricted, and you can only use them for certain things. So you have a lot of other expenses that need to be funded. Even just interim financing, interest, all of those things, and all of the other grants require matching funds that aren't, a state or a federal. So, that's where we use the corporate funds and the naming rights and other things. It's just to fill in those very important gaps. Every project takes longer than you think it's going to. So if you have a project and you have an interest line item, just double it. It's going to be more. We also engaged our college, so York College. We did 11 semesters of project-based learning. So every semester throughout the entire project, we would work with, they have a hospitality class, and so it's a major that they have. So we worked with their hospitality school, and we would meet with their class, and we had a syllabus, and we would come up with either a creative solution to a problem or something along that line that was actually something we were dealing with during that phase of the project. And we would give them 2 choices. They would pick one and they would work on that problem during that semester. Sometimes we got really great results, sometimes not so much. But it was a really great experience, and it was real world experience for these students. They could be on the project site with us, they could come see it. I would go to their class once a week, we would talk about it, they would present to the board at the end. And a lot of times we would use their solution for what we were dealing with. And then now we've transitioned that program into an internship program and transition for employment. York College is it's a pretty decent college town, but they also have started to have a footprint downtown, and they now have a Center for Community Engagement directly across the street from the hotel, which is great. It was another adaptive reuse project. They're in there now, and so it's a really great cohesive relationship with the hospitality students. We also did a lot of workforce training programs. So we got funding to do this through the Community Foundation and through the Rotary and our Women's Giving Circle. We named the program after John Lambert. John Lambert worked for the hotel for most of his life, I think 65 years. And he was sort of a local legend, like the epitome of hospitality. He served Margaret Thatcher, Colin Powell, multiple presidents. And so his family is still very prominent in York. So we named the workforce training program after John Lambert. We received some funding through 3 different grants, and we purchased some hospitality training syllabus information. So we did 4 modules, housekeeping, food and beverage, customer service, and building maintenance. And this was a free training program that we offered to anyone in the community. And it was, I think, a 6-week program. It was a national certificate, so you get a certificate through this program. And then we had a hiring fair. So we intended these attendees of this program to not just be employed at the hotel, but any restaurant downtown. So this is coming out of COVID. So at this time, we're like end of 2021, early 2022 that we're launching this program. A lot of restaurants were really struggling to have employees at the time. So we had this huge hiring fair at the end where everybody could apply for jobs. We invited all the restaurants, our stadium, everyone. And it was a really great experience. There ended up being a challenge because we went through all of this with our intention to hire everyone and then have like 12 weeks, which Hilton required, I think 12 weeks of training before opening, and then the hotel was delayed. So we had hired an entire staff, and then Hilton, we did not get approval to open. That was heartbreaking. And you know, how do you tell everyone that just left their jobs or just got a job that, sorry, no job? But we worked out an arrangement with the York County Country, or the Country Club of York, and they took every single one of them and said, you can have them back when you're ready. And so everyone had a job. The Country Club saved the day. I'll get emotional just thinking about that because that was really, really hard. But it worked out great. So now we've got this beautiful hotel, fully employed. It's walkable. It's a great community asset. We have an upgraded rapid transit stop that they paid for right outside the hotel. So now, you know, it's got a nice enclosure. It's nice, it's not dirty, it's not covered in graffiti, it's welcoming. So, really great experience. These two young ladies were graduates of the program, they're still there. They're just amazing. We also offered this in Spanish and in English, and I think there was 100 certificates that were granted, and I think it was like a 70-30 mix of English and Spanish speaking, and we had enough funding at the end that anyone who needed shoes could get shoes. So it was a really, really good experience. Our public art, I know I mentioned that a couple of times, this was one of my favorite things. We put out a request for proposals to local artists to submit ideas for art in the public spaces. Again, I think we did this in like 2018, thinking, oh, we're gonna be done in 2 years. So the artists had a long wait between when they were awarded the project to when it was actually done. But we have 14 local artists that have installations created just for this project in all of the public spaces. So now we've got a passport and a program and a map, and people can come and visit and find the art and check off a little box, and it's just a really neat experience. But we also have all these different mediums too. So we've got sculpture and glass and metal and fabric and all these cool things. And they're all very local and they all have something to do with the hotel. So that was a really cool experience, and we solicited all the local businesses to sponsor each one. So all the artists were paid. But you know, these are easier sponsorships. These are, $2,500 to $7,000 sponsorships. We went to restaurants, we went to banks, we went to everyone, and we were able to get funding sources for each one. So every artist was paid. So now the hotel's open, and it's got so many amenities. It's beautiful. We were able to hold the PDC conference. We are working still on the street level restaurant. So we have some commercial spaces on the ground level, a restaurant and a coffee shop, raising money. If anybody has $2 million, that's what we need to get this over the finish line. But we'll get it done. The hotel has always been able to support 2 restaurants. So once we have that street level restaurant, I think it's going to be a really great asset to add to the hotel. For now, we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the lobby, and then we also have the rooftop lounge. So this was added to the project. That used to be a general manager's apartment on the roof. So the roof was never a public space. It did not look like that. It was horrible. But it was a general manager's apartment. It was abandoned in the 50s. So it was in terrible shape, it was very blighted, and the whole roof was just covered in like broken air conditioning equipment and other things. So it was kind of an equipment graveyard. We had to clean it up, get everything off the roof, add structural support. We had to add 2 fire stairs and an elevator that go up to the roof, and now we have this beautiful rooftop lounge. We also had to relocate some cell towers too, so that was a challenge. But best view in town. We have this beautiful bar, and we have a small kitchen up there too. So we do have some food service. And then the lobby, which is just gorgeous. You can see there's a mural to the left that was painted by a local artist, and it has Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra, who both performed at our local performing arts and then stayed at the hotel. And then there's glass panels that are hanging in the windows that light up at night. But that's the original floor, and we added this bar, and all the plaster work that was done to the ceiling. It's just a beautiful space. And then this is the new arrival plaza. This is where that 1957 addition used to be. So this whole arrival plaza used to be part of the hotel, and it was just a one-way street, and 2 alleys. So when you would arrive to the hotel prior to 2016, you just drove around the block 4 or 5 times until you figured out there's a garage over here and a garage over here, and then everything is one way. So now we've got a driveway in between the hotel and the county admin building that connects to the garage. So instead of going around, you can just drive right back and forth, and it's so nice. And now there's a sense of arrival. So when you get there, you feel like you're arriving at a destination. Oh, and that is an art installation by a local artist, and you can climb on it and take selfies. So it's really fun. So the end of the project, so if you get into a really big project, it's really hard to even remember what was going on at this time because there was just, the critical path to completion was just an absolute tornado of activity. But the hotel opening was delayed twice, not by our choice, but we ran into a lot of supply chain issues at the end. And you know, I can understand Hilton's position that they didn't want to open the hotel when it was 95% because people would come and maybe not have the best food experience. And they're not going to understand it's because there's a huge, massive stainless steel supply chain issue. So the hotel was delayed twice. The first delay was because of construction taking too long. The second delay was we were done and we had our certificate of occupancy, but we were missing like 3 pieces of kitchen equipment. So that was pretty crazy. But also the FF&E installation, so all the furniture, fixtures, and equipment trying to be installed while they're still building some areas. Nobody can play well together. Nobody can be nice to each other. Nobody could get along, and we ended up having 2 different colors of tape on the floor. Like, you stay over here, and you stay over here, and you can use the yellow tape loading dock, and you can use the red tape loading dock, and nobody touch anybody's tools. Nobody could get along. It was just a lot of personalities. So we get through it, and we have our certificate of occupancy. The hotel was delayed one more time, and so we tried to do a couple of things to keep people. We had to tell a couple of people that they couldn't have their wedding that they had booked a year ago, and they couldn't have their anniversary dinner. And there was a lot of people that wanted to book the hotel right after the opening. We had to call them all. I was one of them. So we did have a flag raising ceremony, which was very cool. So this was right after the first delay. That flagpole is a really neat story because it was added in 1993. And the gentleman that raised the flag was Anthony Stabile, who is with me in that picture. He raised the flag in 1993. He is a World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam War veteran. And he called in 2017 to say, I was the one that raised the flag in 93. I want to raise the flag when it's done. Here's my phone number. And it took forever. So I called him in 2022 and said, hey, but he also said, don't take too long because I'm 93. So I called him 5 or 6 years later, and he answered. And I was like, do you still want to raise this flag? And he did. So it was really awesome. He got to come. He brought his daughter. We invited the Veterans Administration. So we got permission. Everybody had hard hats, and the hotel was done. But we followed all the rules. Everybody had hard hats and stuff. And we invited the Veterans Administration. They donated the flag, and they donated a plaque to be mounted on the building. So that was a really great experience. And it was very emotional because he was able to come and raise the flag again. So the economic impact of this project, the ripple effect of that, and I'm sure, I'm preaching the choir here, you guys all know this, but the direct effect is the total number of jobs created by a project, including the construction jobs. So it's the money that goes into the project. And then the indirect effect is the jobs created by the hotel doing business. So, the hotel's open, they have to buy uniforms, they have to buy toilet paper, they have to buy food. And then the induced effect is the jobs created by the employees being paid and then spending their money. So everybody that works at the hotel goes out and has lunch and has piano lessons for their kids and gets shoes and everything like that. So those are the different ripple effects that you see with a project like this. We now have a beautiful building. We have 80 jobs. The hotel buys lots of stuff, and then they pay all the people, and then they buy things. And that's that ripple effect that you see. And this is right in the heart of our downtown. So everyone that comes to this hotel walks around the city. They go to First Fridays. They buy things at the store. There's a Rite Aid up the street. There's all the parents that come in for college graduation. And then we have restaurants. We've got a lot of restaurants open in the last few years, and everyone can just walk to them. It's really, really nice. But they also have events, and they have conferences, and people have their holiday parties, and you could book the roof for a birthday party. It's really cool. So the total value, when you add all those things together, there's a software that you can use for this, but that's where that number comes from. And that number is construction and 1 year of operations. That's it. So that's where that number comes from. So again, I know I mentioned the creative solutions, but there was a handful of things that we had to figure out ways to overcome that nobody could agree to. One of them was the plaster repair to the ceiling. It is a historic building, and there was beautiful plaster work that cost a ton of money to repair. I mean, there was years and years and years of no temperature control in that building, and water leaks and other problems. And so the ceilings had deteriorated pretty severely. And we proposed 3D printing, which was a new concept to the National Park Service and to Hilton. But we found a local 3D printing company, and we had them print a couple of sections, and we installed them, painted them. You could sand it, you could trim it, and I think we spent, instead of several $100,000 on the plaster repair, I think we spent like $20,000 on 3D printing, and it was a pretty remarkable experience. So if you ever go, look up when you're there, and if the entire lobby, maybe a third of it's 3D printed, and it's almost impossible to tell which sections. But you can order like 1 linear foot, and then you cut it, you trim it, and you put it up there, and you paint it, and it's beautiful. Also the railing, we had to, the railings were very historic, very beautiful. National Park Service, don't touch it. Well, but they're like this high. No current codes is ever going to approve that. So we added an extension. So we created a wrought iron extension that matched the profile. We lifted up the original railing, put it right back on top. Beautiful. We also found a mural. So there was a mural that was painted in 1926 directly on the block of the building. So it was painted in 1926 as a 1 year after opening gift. And it was covered up by drywall, and we did not know it existed. And it was covered up in the 50s. But we found it, and we got a grant through the National Trust for Historic Preservation to do the restoration work, and now it's where it's always going to be. It's right on the block of the building, and it's right behind the reception desk. And then we had the grand opening, and it was the best day. And Hilton said, well, I don't know about a grand opening. We don't want too many people, maybe 20, 30 people. We're like, yeah, it'll be fine. We knew it was going to be a zoo, and it was the best day. And that is probably 1,000 people, because you can't see this side too, but that's, the community just came together. Everyone wanted to be there. It was a really great day. So looking back, the hotel has exceeded all expectations. When we go through this, in the very beginning, we created a pro forma to say, this is how it's going to operate, this is what we think it's going to cost, this is what we think it's going to make, this is how well we think it's going to perform, this is why we should do it. And we were being very conservative at the time. We hope to have 60% occupancy on the best day. It's at 98% occupancy almost all the time. It is always full, so it's exceeding all expectations. And we've also gotten through our first full year, so now we've got something to benchmark. So, our budgeting in the beginning was just guessing. Guessing with the best of intentions and with a lot of help, but guessing. And corporate travel makes a big difference. We've got our Hilton Honors program. There's always transient users at this hotel. So it's wonderful to go there and see I know you and you and you, but it's really even better to see total strangers. Just, wheeling in there and then enjoying the town and going out to eat and asking for recommendations. So it's a lot of fun. And so we also had a first year of events. I got married, so when we had to postpone the opening twice, we had to call lots of people. One of them was everyone in my family, because we postponed our wedding twice. Our first wedding date was supposed to be October 15th. Our second one was supposed to be December 3rd. We got married on February 25th, and it was a great wedding, and it was a dream. I was either going to get married in our backyard or at this hotel. I wasn't getting married anywhere else. That was it. There's no other way. But we had, ribbon cuttings, First Friday events. We had a huge gala. It was beautiful. It was a Roaring 20s gala. We invited every donor. Every donor got 8 people at a table. It was the best day. We also had a community mural painting party, so now we have a new installation of art. We did a time capsule, just countless events. And then it's doing really well in Hilton. This is, actually, I don't think I updated the slides last time, but it hasn't really changed. They're still killing it. But they're between number 1 and number 7 in all of Hilton. And that's ranked by all of the reviews that you get online and by the surveys that guests receive. And this is for overall stay, cleanliness. And there's another one. I don't work for the hotel, so I don't really speak hospitality. But they're doing great. They're killing it. And we do have the commercial spaces, so I am working on putting a restaurant at the street level. We would like to have a steakhouse. We have a great restaurant scene, but we don't have a steakhouse. And we don't want to duplicate what we already have. We really want something that complements the rest of our downtown food scene. But we need a couple $1 million. We always do. We always need a couple $1 million. There's always a new project. But we've gone through a lot of different iterations of this, and we feel like we've got a really great plan, and we're starting to pull it together, so it's very exciting. There's a church that is directly behind the hotel, and so this was something, it was abandoned 30 years ago. So this is a big problem. We've had squatting issues. It's a decommissioned church. It's from the 1850s, and it's been vacant since 1995. And the commissioner said back in like 16 or 17, well, if you're going to put all this money in the hotel, can you do something about the church? And you don't say no to the commissioner, so sure, we'll do something about the church. So that's our next project. And we hope to incorporate it into the campus of the hotel. This will also be an adaptive reuse, probably not with tax credits. It's just too much work. And there's a lot of other problems with that too. But we would like to include this in the campus of the hotel. We'd like it to be a supplemental event venue, wedding venue. We have a couple other ideas of how to keep it activated on a regular basis. But we really think that this would be great because then we can start bidding on larger conferences. Right now we can't bid on any really, really big conferences because we don't have a ballroom and an exhibit hall. So this would allow us to have, events with 400 people instead of 250. So that's our next project. We do have $1 million in funding, and I'm in the middle of a planning grant that we got through the National Trust, and then that'll help us figure out what to do next. Is this a $6 million thing? Is it an $8 million thing? Get some renderings, get a plan, get some real construction numbers, and then figure out what we're going to do. So that's hopefully going to be in the next 2-3 years. So looking ahead, we always are trying to expand our partnerships and opportunities. We want to make sure that the hotel stays relevant. It has a great operator. We don't run it. So a lot of people get confused with how this is structured, but it is locally owned. And then we have Hilton as the franchise. We pay a franchise fee. And then we have it operated by a hotelier. So they run it, Hilton is the brand, and it's locally owned. And that's it. So this is what we say around town, what's your Yorktowne story? Because everyone has something to say about the Yorktowne. Everyone has some memory, whether it was they worked there, or they had their prom there, or their parents ate there, or someone stayed there. Everyone has a Yorktowne story. So that's one of the things that we really like to say around the community. And I always love hearing people's experience, whether it was before, 80 years ago, now, yesterday. It's just a really, really fun story. So with that, we can open up for questions. I'm an open book. We can talk about anything you want.
So, isn't that exciting? I'm just blown away by her, especially the 3D printing for the plaster work.
That was neat.
And I was there, and I couldn't tell the difference. It was just amazing. So, I have a question.
Sure.
Did you have renderings when you organized your community stakeholder fundraising storytelling visits, meetings and group sessions? What did you didn't have your performa that you could pass out.
Yeah.
So what visible, tangible thing did you share with them so they could catch the vision?
That's a great question. We did. And it's really funny, if I look back to our first iteration of renderings, how different they are from what we ended up being, but it was still close. But yes, we have a local company, they're called AV Sketches, and they do nationwide work. So if you ever need a rendering, AV Sketches, they're amazing. But they did all of our renderings, so we paid for 3. And I think it was around $3,000 or $4,000. But we paid for 3. And they spend a lot of time. They're there, they take all these measurements, they scan everything, they get, it's real rendering. We did lobby, exterior, and roof is what we did. So we paid for 3, and we used them, we peddled that everywhere. And we also created one-page handouts, so every time we would do a tour, we'd give everybody something. in the very beginning, we created a survey, you know, how would you like to use the hotel? What would you like to use it for? How often would you use it? What price point are you looking for? That's something that I didn't say, and I usually say it during my capital stack, is that we do have construction debt, we have long-term financing, but we were able to secure enough private funding to keep our long-term debt to $11 million. So it's about a $55, $60 million project, and we have $11 million in long-term debt, which means that we can cash flow soon enough and keep the prices reasonable enough that people can afford to use it. You know, no, it's not going to do anybody any good if we have a hotel that no one can afford to go to. So we have York appropriate prices. I think the cheapest room is around $130 a night, and on average it's probably around $170, $180 a night. Now if you get a suite, it's going to be more. So there are 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom suites. Some of the suites are 1,000 square feet, but most of the rooms are very reasonable. So that was something that we put, you know, on all of our handouts, like some of the high points of like, this is why we want to do this is the economic impact. You know, like we want everybody to feel welcome, we're going to create this many jobs, it's going to cost this much money, and then we have the renderings. And so we did pay for 3, and then we could use them however we wanted. So we had some blow-up ones that we put on easels every time we did a tour, and then we created handouts that we updated throughout the project to make them more relevant. After our initial really big value engineering session, you know, we lost an elevator, we lost this, we lost that, we kept the roof. We changed the renderings because they were pretty different at that point, and then we used those until the end. And now we have real photos. So I think we did 2, I think, iterations of renderings. That was really good. So if you ever need a recommendation, they're amazing. A/B sketches. Any other questions? Come on. I should have planted some questions.
What was the address of the church?
36 South Duke Street.
Okay.
Yep. So the hotel is right on Market Street, but Duke is a one-way street which connects right to the Royal Square district and right to the Market Street district. So the church is right behind the hotel.
Okay.
So
it's right there.
Yeah. So we've got the hotel, we've got the parking garage, the church, and then we have a historic fire company, Royal Square district with restaurants, Market Street district with our market, our performing arts center, and then like Restaurant Row. Everything's walkable. It's a great section.
You had mentioned about the funding that you got for the historic preservation aspect of it. Was there, you know, a delta there where you felt like the money that you got to do it was not enough to really support everything you need to get done to accomplish the goal?
Someday I'm actually gonna have to sit down and try and quantify that. But when you don't have the capital stack and you need $10 million, you know, there's no other way to get it. I do think that it cost a lot to do that, but a lot of that is because of the structure of the project. So it's not really the tax credit program's fault. We were doing this as a county government entity. So we were a tax immune government entity that was the funding stream, the conduit for the tax credits, which created an issue of creating a structure that could have a flow that doesn't create a taxable event when it shouldn't. So we had to create this whole entity structure. We had a lot of legal fees in there that we weren't anticipating to figure out how to do it. Like, we are an eligible entity to get them, but how can we actually do this to make sure that the funds flow and that we can get these credits? The credits are also, so federal historic tax credit, I think it's like 80% of your eligible expenses, and then you sell it for something below, or 20%, and then you sell it for 87 cents on the dollar, whatever. We got like $9 or $10 million. So, you know, we had a huge funding gap. It was a source. We had to spend a lot to do it. We've never actually sat down. I don't really want to. A couple people have suggested, I'm like, yeah, we'll do that someday. I don't know if I really want to know that number. I think if the other issue is that when we were awarded the tax credits, you have to go out and sell them. You have to find a company that has a huge tax liability to buy them. I think this is a lot easier to do if you're a for-profit business or if you're a developer. If you're a county government entity trying to find somebody to do that, it's kind of a tough sell. Also, it was a hotel in the middle of COVID. Like, we're trying to sell these tax credits like August of 2020, when every hotel in the country is laying everyone off and they're at 20% occupancy. So the only entity that was interested in purchasing the tax credits was JP Morgan, the federal bank, and their underwriting process was way worse than if you sold your tax credits to like Sherwin-Williams or another for-profit company. So it was a combination of, we were a tough entity, it was during COVID, and then the only interested party had an underwriting process that was a nightmare. So I know that was probably more than what you asked, but
in the same respect, you'd have a different product.
yeah, we would.
You know, at this
Right.
point.
It would. It wouldn't be as cool. It definitely wouldn't be as cool. Yeah. And we probably wouldn't have gotten over the threshold. You know, when we got that tax credit award, we could say to our donors, we found $10 million, we got this, we have the approval, this is how we're going to structure it, this is what we can do, and we need you to help match it. If we wouldn't have had that, we wouldn't have been able to convince everyone else to come in at the end. So a lot of our philanthropic sources come in, everyone comes in at the end. You know, once you can prove that you can do it and you can get 75% there, that's when the philanthropic sources really want to come in and help. They're not going to be the first ones in. So we wouldn't have been able to get it done without it. It just was really painful.
Yeah.
So we're not going to use them for the church. I think we know enough now to respect the historic integrity without going through that process. So, and we have a really great consultant that can guide us along the way. So, good question.
When it came to casting vision to the community and just trying to generate more buy-in, what kind of negative pushback did you guys run into, if any? Or what kind of, were there any doom and rumors that were just kind of, you had to work through some of that, and what did that look like, just trying to...
Yeah. So, I mean, there was, like, in every town, there's, you know, family names and some foundations that have all the money, and you go to the same ones, and then you try and find new sources, too. So, you know, we probably had, if there's 4 or 5 big foundations in our community, there was 1 or 2 that just didn't want anything to do with it. Sometimes it's because they like to support other things. Like sometimes their mission is, you know, children's services and animals. Okay, a hotel's not for them. There was 1 or 2 that were like, no, this is dumb, we don't like it, and they're not going to support it. And, you know, it's hard. We keep going back, and they just don't want it, and then you just give up. There were a few... I'm trying to think of some negative ones. For the most part, we didn't have negative feedback. We just had to keep meeting with people over and over and over again to get them over the hump, to convince them we're actually, because it took so long and it cost so much more than it was supposed to. We had a lot of non-believers, you know, 2/3 of the way through the project. Mm-hmm. So to keep everybody interested and excited and to keep them, you know, happy and you know, confident that we're going to be able to do this, it was a challenge, and we would just have to keep meeting with them. And it took a lot of leadership meetings. You know, we had a lot of, you know, the president of my organization meeting with the president of WellSpan and the president of the college and the president of everything, just to say, like, we really are going to do this. Like, we have the confidence to get it done. So there was a lot of that. It wasn't a lot of negative, just more like lack of confidence.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody wanted it to happen. It was just a really heavy lift, and we all had doubts at one point or another, especially around 2021. So, anybody else? Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to your team within YCEA and your project management infrastructure there?
Oh yeah. So our team is the best. It's a really great team. We have a really, really great and creative marketing department, and that helps tremendously when you could just rely on them for updating your handouts and your one-pagers. And, you know, I'm at the project, on the project. I don't want to do Facebook Lives. I think they're dumb. But they're not dumb, and everybody really likes them, and it keeps everybody involved. And I'm busy, but they would make me do it. They would put it on my calendar, and they would make me do it. And I would wear nice clothes that day, and I would do my hair that day, and we would do a Facebook Live, and then everybody's excited. So having that team to keep everybody focused on it is super important to keep everyone engaged. And those things aren't dumb. They're just not what I do. You know, they think what I do is dumb. You know, it's but everybody's role is really important. So we have a really great leadership team. We have a fantastic CFO that would keep track of everything, and we would meet weekly to say, where are we with this? Where's the gap? You know, we had 30 or 40 grants going at any given time, and how are we managing that? And how are we making sure that we're reporting on the right, you know, at the right time, and what's on everyone's calendar? And then, you know, I was the on-site person doing the day-to-day project stuff, working with the construction manager and the architects and the engineers, and how am I reporting up to my leadership, and how am I keeping my marketing team informed of what we're doing. They could also help with logo development and working with the renderings and organizing those things. So we had a really great leadership team. We also had a really, really great, engaged, and brave board of directors. So we had a board of directors that wasn't afraid to do this, and they put their own money in there too. So that was really, really important. If we didn't have that strong leadership, if we didn't have the brave and excited board, we wouldn't have gotten it done. But our organization has about 20 people. So, and we're the Economic Development Agency, the Chamber of Commerce, and our Main Street organization. So, we would also work with our Main Street team. Like, we would have monthly merchant tours. We would invite all the restaurateurs, the merchants to come to see it. What are we doing? Keeping them informed. That way, when people shop at their establishment, they can talk about it. So, engaging our membership, our Main Street organization. And then we would also have to go to city council and give them updates, and go to commissioners meetings and give updates. And so I relied really heavily on our leadership team for those things too. So we do have a really great organization, and we could, spread ourselves out enough that no ball was being dropped that we really, really didn't want to drop. And Facebook Lives aren't dumb. I just don't like doing them. So, yes.
Sorry if I missed this in your presentation, but you said the final amount that came to was much higher than you originally expected.
Yes.
What was your original figure?
I think it was around 33 or 35 million. But it wasn't a Hilton, and it wasn't a historic rehabilitation. So when we were at that 30, 33, 35 million, it was 33 or 35. When we were there, it was, we're gonna get some new furniture, we're gonna add a new elevator, we're gonna add sprinklers, we're gonna slap a coat of paint on it, and it's gonna be done, it's gonna be great. But when we really got into it, it needed a lot more. And then that's when we really started meeting with the community and meeting with our stakeholders, and that's when, they decided that it really should have a flag, and it really should be a historic rehabilitation. So that's what added those costs, along with COVID and everything else. Anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, so the church.
Yeah.
When you start really diving into redeveloping that, what is going to be your decision to, like, as you get in, you discover things, at what point do you decide this is not cost effective, we're gonna have to demolish it?
The go, no go?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I probably won't know until we're there. First, we're in the middle of our initial project planning. So we got a grant through the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We got $30,000. So we're doing an architect engineering study. They're looking at masonry, the foundation, environmental, ADA accessibility, those things. Can it be saved? Like, are the bones good enough to save it? Because it's 1850. It's fearful. It's built on top of a cemetery, so there's graves underneath. It's going to be really hard to add an elevator without having to dig. That's a whole other story. I could do a whole presentation on just that. So if you ever run into a cemetery problem, let me know, because I could do a whole presentation just on that. So that study is due back in October, November. And part of that study is also, there's a section in the back of the church that has to come off. So they're studying how that would be removed, how can we separate it and then save the structure. And so I'm really excited to see that. I understand that it has good bones and that it can be saved, so that's exciting. And then once we know that, we can work with the hotel operating company to put together a pro forma of, how do we see this functioning? How can we have activity on a regular basis? Can we put a couple of hotel rooms in there too? Can they be more cottagey? Can we incorporate it in a way that has regular activity? That pro forma will tell us how much we need to invest in it, along with the structural analysis. I mean, we'll be guessing. We're still have to go out to bid and pay prevailing wage and do certified payroll and all those hard things. But hopefully that'll get us close to knowing, is this an $8 or a $10 or a $6 million project? And then we'll start raising money, we'll start writing grants, and if we can get halfway there, that's usually, give or take, I'm being very broad. But we have to have the support, we have to have some money. So we'll start writing grants, and then we'll start meeting with our philanthropic supporters and see what their temperature is, and then we'll decide from there. But we'll do that before we put a shovel in the ground.
And what do you do about the community backlash should the studies come back that this building cannot be saved?
I mean, that's really hard to take something down that's so cool. And it's also in the historic district, and it's on the National Register. I mean, if it can't be saved, it can't be saved. And that's just all there is to it. But we just have to do the best we can and put out as much information as possible to say why. And then give people a long time to think about it. Maybe not do the demo right away. You have to get, it has to sink in a little bit. Hopefully it can be saved. It is very, very cool. But it does happen. We had to tear down a couple of houses on another part of town that, again, is in the historic district, and they're cool, and they had some stained glass windows, and they're really old, but they had been abandoned for 20, 30 years, and they were full of drug activity and squatting, and the roofs were caving in, and they had sewage underneath them, and they just couldn't be saved. And we had to take them down, but we gave it, we presented it to the hard board and city council, and eventually it was approved, and then, you go out to bid, and you eventually do it. People don't love it, but we'll do everything we can not to. So it's just, if it can't be saved, it can't be saved. So, good question. Anybody else?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I
Thanks.
think you need to